Hi sweeties, how are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sim. If this is your first time of coming across this channel, sweetheart, kindly smash that subscribe button, turn on the notification so you get notified each time I upload, and please give this video a thumb up. I appreciate you all so much, and I am saying a very big shout out to every one of you for all the love and support you all give me here. I am truly grateful. Thank you all so much. So today we'll be talking something very important, and it's about this white man, Tim White, right? Who started by saying that rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown people, right? And oh yeah, it's easy to convince them, right? Because they refuse to know the history and they do not understand the history. And I truly do not know that they are like, that they are the weapon the rich white men use against black people. When you are not educated or when you do not know a lot, or the poor white people are being used by the white rich people, telling them that their enemies are black people and the rest of it. So he also mentioned that the history of Europe about killing each other, their history is about killing each other, not until they figure out that there are other people too, that is black people, right? And that they were scared that the enslaved Africans were going to rise and take power because they know that they were being played. And when they figure out that they were being played, they also look for a way to fight back. And you know what? Step to the screen. I am just going to roll this clip. We'll come back to talk about it. And I absolutely want to read all your comments. Let me know what you all think. And straight up, I am rolling.
And the whole history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other. That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other before we figured out there were other people to kill. We just killed each other, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated their ass right back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, in the colonies, the colonial elite, looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants, who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up, and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another, or they're going to rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote-unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people. Right? So ultimately, the rich figure out they got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness, and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man, right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. No more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon, the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped. Because the divide and conquer had begun to work, right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks, they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and white.
When we look around and we see today in our politics a rich white man telling working class white people that their problem is brown people. We need to understand the historical pedigree of that. That is symbolic of the entire history of race and class politics in America. The history of rich white people telling working class and poor white people that their problem are black and brown people. Beginning in the 1600s, that is what happens. Prior to about 1670 or so, there was no such thing as the white race, at least not recognized as such, called as such. That is not what people of European descent were when they were in Europe. They were English, they were Irish, they were Scottish, they were whatever they were. They were not white. Only in the colonies do we become white, and for a very specific reason, because in those early years of the colonial period, where you had white indentured servants, one level above enslaved themselves, and you had African-descended folks, some of them enslaved for life, others indentured servants also in the earliest years of the colonies, those people would often see their interests as being common. They all realized that they were being screwed over by the same landowners, the same elite. They fomented various rebellions, like Bacon's Rebellion in Virginia, others as well. And as a result, the elite in the colonies realized that they had to figure out a way to get the other folks from Europe on their team. So they created this mentality that said, you're now a member of the white race. You're on our team. You're wearing our uniform. Now you're at the end of the bench. You may not get in the game, but you're on our team, you see. So then they start putting white folks, now called, on the slave patrols, right? Didn't really give them any land or any real power except the power to control people of color, which is why folks of color say, and they are right, that modern policing traces to the system of slave patrols and slavery. And we have to be clear on that because that's the history. Right? Whiteness was created to divide and conquer, to create the notion that even though you might not have much, at least you're not black, at least you're not indigenous, at least you're not Mexican, at least you're not Chinese working on the railroads to build the transcontinental economy. You may not have much, but at least you have, as W.E.B. Du Bois said, the psychological wage of whiteness. And it's a trick that was played during the Civil War era on my people in the South, right? Rich folk, landowners in the South telling poor white folks who didn't own anything that they got to go out and fight to preserve the rich man's property in human beings. Fascinating. Why would you do that? Why would I go fight for your property? Well, because you told me that if I don't, these slaves are going to take my job. No, fool, they got your job. That's the point. If you got to charge $1 a day and you can make them work for free because you own them, guess who got the gig, Jack? Not you. In fact, the system of enslavement was in the long run against the class interest of working class white folks, but they got suckered. Same thing happened in the union movement. You had white labor union folks who didn't want black and brown bodies in their union because it would reduce the professionalism of the craft. No, fool, it'll double the size of your union. And then when you go out on strike, they can't replace your happy ass with the brown folk that you didn't want next to you in the first place. Because when they do replace you with them, then you will blame them, not the elite. See how that works? It's a trick. And it has worked for hundreds of years. It is working on some folk right now. And it is our job to resist that with
All right. So I am going to preface this by saying I absolutely appreciate the fact that it is being done, that it is being spoken about, that the work is getting done. But I would be lying if I say I didn't feel a way about Tim Wise capitalizing off of speaking out against racism. Like, he's saying the same stuff that we say, but he's getting paid by the same people who don't want to hear us say it. I'm gonna have to research if he's actually giving back. Like, I don't know much about what he does with his money, but I just feel a way. I could be wrong about whether he's actually getting rich off of it, but I don't see him not getting rich off of it. I'm gonna go research. Y'all know I don't like to be wrong.
So this is all we got from the stitches. Yeah, I was able to also make research if he's giving back. He is actually giving back. But then I know he is being paid for to, like, say all this and all that, but he has really been consistent with all, with his teaching and talking for a very longer time. So the truth is that I really like how he, tackle them. He speaks the truth, and it's always like wide open and the rest of it. So that I always enjoy each time I watch him and the rest of it. So this is where I'm going to draw the curtain. I absolutely want to read your comments. Let me know what you all think in the comment section, and see you all in my next video. Bye for now.